The artificial hum of the Terran ship surrounds me as the doors part. I step into the meeting room with measured ease, every movement deliberate. The air is colder here, sharper, laced with a sterility I find unwelcoming. Yet, it is not discomforting. Nothing about their environment is meant to soothe. It is built for function, efficiency, and war. The ship reflects them well. I do not falter as my eyes adjust to the subdued lighting, scanning the space with reflexive precision. The walls, metallic and unadorned, conceal mechanisms I can already identify: hidden turrets, atmospheric stabilizers, and surveillance nodes. The room is not large, but it is imposing in its starkness. This is not a place of diplomacy, it is a chamber of power. My senses brush against the subtle vibrations of the systems embedded in its structure, each one catalogued and dismissed in a moment. And there he stands, a fortress of metal and defiance. The Terran is encased in their Aegis armor, the design brutish and practical, its bulk disguising the advanced technology humming within. The dark blue plating, lined with green highlights, is scuffed in places, marks of wear that speak to its use in combat rather than mere display. Despite its weighty appearance, he moves with practiced ease, a predator accustomed to his shell. His visor is a smooth, mirrored barrier, obscuring his face entirely. I cannot see his eyes, and that absence is disconcerting in its own way. Eyes reveal much: intent, resolve, fear, but he has chosen to remain hidden, shielded. It is a choice I understand, though it sharpens my awareness of him as a threat. Still, I do not stop. I walk further into the room, and each step feels heavier in the charged silence between us. His frame is imposing, yes, but not unfamiliar. I have seen countless warriors like him before, beings built for battle, encased in armors that declare their strength with every facet. Yet the weight of his presence here is not just the armor, it is the man within. Stopping a calculated distance from the chair meant for me, I incline my head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. My gaze lingers on him as I analyze his stance. The faint hum of the armor's servos, and the way his hands rest at his sides. Ready, but not yet hostile. I take in the room once more, not for its design, but for what it reveals about its makers. The Terrans have tread a path of conquest, but there is no art to their creations, no reverence for what they shape. This ship, like their armor, is a tool of survival and dominion. It is their nature to impose, to claim, but it is also their nature to endure. And that, I think, makes them more dangerous than most. Then, I speak. My voice, steady and calm, carries across the space, the words familiar to my tongue but alien to his ears. Greetings. He stiffens, confusion flashing in the minute adjustments of his posture. Of course, he cannot understand me, not yet. His muttered frustration is barely audible, but I catch it. Of course we can't communicate. Why would it be that easy? I resist the urge to smile, though there is no malice in his ignorance. With a subtle motion, I activate the translator embedded beneath my armor's collar. The shift is seamless, the device attuning itself to the linguistic patterns I have already deciphered. I have sorted the issue with communication now, I say, my tone measured but unmistakably direct. Had to hear you speak before I could adapt your language to ours and make the needed changes for us to converse. His reaction is almost imperceptible, a blink, a faint tension in his stance. It is not fear, but something akin to wariness. Good. He should be wary. Before he can respond, I continue, my gaze steady. You and your people have tread onto our ground, our world, I say, letting the words settle heavily in the air. And we want you to stop ruining it and leave. Immediately. The silence stretches between us, heavy with the unspoken weight of history and intent. His stance shifts subtly, a predator assessing another. I see the flicker of something beneath his composure, an instinct honed by battle, by the Terran way of conflict. He does not flinch. His resolve is iron, his posture unyielding. Yet I can sense the tension within him, a coil wound tight. He responds with calm, measured words. He does not lash out, nor does he retreat. Instead, he speaks of ignorance, of not knowing this world was ours, of a preference for resolution over bloodshed. It is a calculated response, one that seeks to diffuse without yielding entirely. I hear his words, and while part of me doubts the sincerity of any Terran, another part recognizes the thread of truth within them. I study him as he speaks. His voice is steady, resonant within the confines of his armor, but it carries more than the weight of words. The Terrans are a young race, impulsive and ambitious, yet their rapid rise has made them formidable. They are not reckless, they are driven. And that drive, while dangerous, is not without merit. I see it in him now, a man shaped by survival, by the harsh lessons of war. My people, I say finally, my voice calm but laced with centuries of burden, have walked this galaxy far longer than your species has even dreamed of reaching the stars. We have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the burning of worlds, the birth of new ones from the ashes of the old. War is not unfamiliar to us. It has always been with us, something we did not choose, but something we have learned to endure. I pause, letting my words settle. His posture remains steady, but I sense the faint ripple of acknowledgement in his silence. I step closer, my gaze unwavering. Your people have earned their place in the galaxy, Captain Korvax, but at what cost? I have seen your battles, your conquests, your unwavering resolve. You are relentless. Your survival is admirable, but it is also devastating. In your wake, nothing remains but ash. His response is quiet but firm. He speaks of their losses, their struggles, and their determination to rebuild. He calls themselves survivors, not conquerors. It is a distinction that strikes me, not because it absolves them, but because it reveals something more. The Terrans are not blind to their own nature. They endure as we have endured, and in that endurance I see a reflection of what we once were. Then let it be so, I say at last, my tone softening ever so slightly. You will find no glory here, Terran, no easy victories, only the slow, painful march of time. The universe holds many lessons for those who think they understand it. He nods, his stance unchanged, but his voice quieter. I will remember that. As he turns to leave, the air feels heavier, the weight of our exchange lingering. He stops just before the threshold, glancing back. Wait, he says, his voice cutting through the silence. Your name? What do I call you? I step forward, meeting his visor with my gaze. Celestarch Lunareth Nalythar, I reply, each word carrying the weight of who I am and what I protect. He inclines his head slightly. Captain Armine Korvax, he says in return. The silence stretches between us one final time, a thread tenuously connecting two paths that may one day intersect again. Without another word, I turn and leave, the Terran's name echoing faintly in my thoughts. The metallic hum of the celestial grace embraced me as I stepped aboard, its psionic resonance thrumming faintly beneath the surface. This ship, one of the crown jewels of our fleet, pulsed with a life that was both familiar and sacred. Its bioluminescent corridors, casting soft hues of amethyst and sapphire, were a testament to our people's harmonious blend of life and technology. Yet, as I walked, That beauty felt distant, a fragile veil against the weight pressing on my thoughts. The Terrans. Their fleet loomed in orbit, and though our initial encounter had been measured, the fragility of the truce weighed heavily. They were a young race, brash and relentless, their ascent forged in the fires of conquest and survival. Yet, amidst their cold ambition, there was something else, something I could not yet name. It clung to Captain Korvax like an unseen mantle, lingering in my thoughts even now. Even more curious was the faint resonance I felt in his presence. It was not communication, not in any conventional sense, but a subtle tether, a flicker of awareness that stretched beyond words. It was unsettling and compelling in equal measure, yet curiosity and caution walked a fine line, and my duty allowed little room for either. My people's safety came first. The bridge came into view, the crew awaiting me in quiet anticipation. As I stepped through the crystalline threshold, every eye turned toward me. They carried their burdens with quiet dignity, their faces marked by a weary resolve. These were not just warriors. They were caretakers of our legacy, protectors of our dwindling future. I stopped at the central console, my voice steady but warm as it carried through the chamber. Prepare the ship for departure. We will leave Silvanara with minimal signature. Sentinel drones are to maintain constant vigilance. I want detailed reports on the Terrans' every movement. Any deviation, any sign of aggression, and I am to be informed without delay. Acknowledgements rippled across the bridge, the subtle tension in the air loosening slightly. These commands were not new, yet the gravity of issuing them here, above this world, felt heavier. Silvanara was more than a cradle world. It was a sanctuary, a piece of our identity. Leaving it under the watchful gaze of outsiders was a bitter necessity. I turned toward the communications officer. Relay to the surface, inform the settlement fleet to maintain high orbit for now. The young, the elders, and the settlers will remain aboard until further notice. No one descends until we are certain of their safety. The officer hesitated, her hand hovering over the crystalline interface. Celestarch. The settlers have waited years for this moment. The elders. I raised a hand gently, meeting her gaze. I know, I said softly, my tone firm but carrying the weight of shared sorrow. I know how long they have waited, but their safety outweighs the ache of delay. This is still our cradle world, and I will not risk them, not when uncertainty lingers. She nodded, her hands moving quickly as the orders were dispatched. The soft hum of psionic communication filled the air, a quiet reassurance of our connection to the lives aboard the settlement ships, lives that entrusted us with their protection. From the corner of my vision, I noticed Thalion, the youngest officer among us, approach hesitantly. His presence was familiar, almost grounding, a reminder of the hope our kind still carried. He lingered at the edge of the console, his curiosity evident despite his disciplined posture. "Speak, Thalion," I said gently, sensing his unspoken question. He hesitated, then stepped closer. "The Terrans," he began, his tone thoughtful but edged with unease. "What did you make of them? Of their captain?" His question gave me pause. I leaned lightly against the console, my gaze drifting toward the viewport where Silvanara's bioluminescent surface shimmered faintly. "They are complex," I replied after a moment. "A species shaped by survival, tempered in ways we cannot fully understand. They are not without merit, though their ambition is perilous." "And the captain?" Thalion pressed, his curiosity undeterred. "You seemed intrigued by him." I allowed a faint smile, more at his persistence than the question itself. "Intrigued, perhaps," I admitted. "Korvax is not like others of his kind. He carries their steel, yes, but there is something beneath it. Something deeper. He is deliberate, calculating. A man who understands the cost of survival. Thalion tilted his head, his youthful features lighting with a faint grin. Perhaps you liked him then. I raised an eyebrow, my tone a careful mix of humor and chiding. Liked him. Do not mistake curiosity for sentiment, Thalion. He is Terran, a warrior of a species that carves their will into the galaxy without pause. But even a blade, honed and dangerous, has purpose. It is the purpose I seek to understand, not the man. He nodded, though his smile lingered. Still, it's strange, isn't it? Meeting one of them face to face. They're so different from us. They are, I agreed quietly, my voice softening. But difference is not always a thing to be feared. If nothing else, Korvax reminded me of that. The moment of reflection was shattered by a sharp alert from the tactical console. My gaze snapped to the officer on duty, her face pale as she turned to meet mine. Celestarch, unidentified vessels emerging from warp, Xalvorth fleet. The bridge froze, the weight of her words sinking into every soul present. My breath caught for the briefest of moments, the name clawing at memories better left buried. Raise shields, I commanded, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. All hands to battle stations. Deploy defensive formations. Escort ships are to form a perimeter immediately. The hum of the Grace shifted, the psionic core thrumming with renewed intensity as the ship's systems sprang to life. The viewport darkened, and in the void beyond, the jagged silhouettes of the Xalvorth fleet emerged. Predatory and cruel. Their biosynthetic hulls gleaming with an unnatural luminescence. The scale of their forces was staggering, their numbers eclipsing our own, a testament to their relentless efficiency. They tracked us, Thalion whispered, his voice barely audible. How did they... It doesn't matter how, I interrupted, my tone steel. What matters is that we stop them here. The bridge erupted into motion, every officer moving with precision born of countless drills. Yet beneath their efficiency, I could feel the ripple of unease, the shadow of the Xalvorth's betrayal, still fresh in the hearts of my people. Prepare all weapons systems, I ordered, my voice calm but resonant. This is no longer about vigilance, this is survival. The void shattered into fire and fury. From the moment the Xalvorth emerged from their cloaked positions, the serenity of space gave way to the chaos of war. Sleek, predatory ships streaked toward us, their serrated biosynthetic hulls radiating malevolence as they closed the distance with unnerving speed. They had come not to conquer, but to destroy. Battle stations! My voice rang out across the bridge, steady despite the storm building around us. All escort vessels, form a protective perimeter. Civilian transports are priority. Protect them at all costs. The celestial grace thrummed as it came to life, its core pulsing in synchrony with the warriors aboard, the bioluminescent veins of the ship glowing brighter as battle protocols engaged. The void outside, once silent and still, now roared with the fury of war. The jagged, chitinous monstrosities of the Xalvorth descended in waves, their ships warping into reality like hungry predators, shifting and reforming in grotesque displays of biomechanical adaptation. I stood at the bridge, hands tightening over the console, as I watched the void transform into an abyss of fire and death. All vessels, defensive pattern Aelythari, hold the line. Do not let them reach the civilians. Orders rippled through the fleet like a psionic surge, each captain receiving my command as if the words were carved into their very souls. The Aelythari ships moved in elegant unison, their silvered hulls shimmering like fractured starlight. No clunky formations, no rigid lines. Ours was a dance of death, ships weaving between one another, energy lances searing through the dark, slicing into the enemy like celestial blades. The Xalvorth responded in kind, their fleet expanding outward like a vast, growing cancer. Their vessels were alive, shifting, mutating, unfathomable horrors of sinew and void-forged metal. Where we were precision, they were brutality. Where we were grace, they were unrelenting hunger. And they struck with monstrous force. The Aelytharian, one of our forward frigates, moved swiftly to intercept an encroaching vanguard. Its sleek, crystalline structure refracted the burning glow of distant stars, its turrets firing in perfect synchronization, cutting through the oncoming swarm. Luminous spears of energy tore into the nearest enemy vessel, piercing its carapace-like hull, sending sickly green ichor spraying into the void. The Xalvorth ship twisted as if in agony. Then its form expanded, splitting apart into smaller vessels, fractal-like horrors that lunged at the Aelytharian, devouring it mid-flight. The ship's shields collapsed in an instant, its final psionic scream lost to the cold emptiness of space as its core detonated. Aelytharian lost. The report cut through the bridge, a dagger of reality plunging deep into my gut. But there was no time for grief. The Xalvorth were an endless tide, and for everyone we cut down, another 3 emerged from their grotesque, ever-shifting fleet. Redirect fire. Focus on their heavy-class vessels before they breach the perimeter. The Celestial Grace's primary weapons engaged, its psionic lances, brilliant arcing beams of harnessed energy, slammed into the nearest Xalvorth dreadnought. The monstrous thing convulsed as its biomechanical plating peeled back like flesh torn from bone, revealing the pulsing, cancerous mass beneath. The dreadnought howled, not a sound, not a transmission, but a raw psychic wail that sent tremors through our minds, scraping against our very souls. It flailed, shuddering under the onslaught, then detonated, sending organic shrapnel spinning through space. A moment's relief. Then came the counterstrike. A Xalvorth battleship, a massive, grotesque construct pulsating with necrotic energy, disgorged a torrent of quantum phase lances. The Serenith, a swift destroyer, veered sharply to evade, but it was not enough. The lances punched through its shields like a predator's fangs, gouging deep, slicing through deck after deck, before the ship folded in on itself, shattering into a supernova of light and wreckage. The void burned. Serenith destroyed. I could feel the psychic reverberation of its loss ripple through me, through all of us. The Aelythari did not merely fight together. We were bound in mind and spirit. Every death was felt, every loss a blade through the soul. And yet, we endured. Brace for impact. The Celestial Grace shuddered violently as enemy fire raked its side, shields flaring in a desperate attempt to absorb the kinetic force. Sparks rained across the bridge as systems momentarily flickered. I clenched my jaw, stabilizing myself, eyes locking onto the tactical readouts. Seal breaches on deck 6 through 9. Divert auxiliary power to forward shields. Deploy drones now! A swarm of psionically guided drones shot forth, spectral phantoms weaving between enemy vessels with surgical precision. They latched onto the weakest points of the Xalvorth ships, burrowing deep, detonating in violent blinding flashes. The Xalvorth adapted instantly, their ships twisting, plating regenerating, their monstrous bodies folding in on themselves to consume the damage. They were learning. Beyond the viewport, the vastness of war stretched before me, a titanic clash of light and darkness, of ancient grace and unfathomable hunger. Our fleet, luminous like a dying constellation, was locked in mortal combat against a tide of writhing horrors. Ships detonated in brilliant bursts of fire and debris, bodies, Aelythari and Xalvorth alike, drifting into the abyss. the shattered remnants of our kind, our enemies, now indistinguishable in the graveyard of war. Then I saw it. A cluster of Xalvorth vessels broke from the main formation, their trajectory unmistakable. They were heading for the Cerelin, the central civilian transport, carrying thousands of our young and elders. No! The word slipped from my lips, raw and filled with dread. Divert fire! Protect the Cerelin at all costs! The escorts responded immediately, their captains voicing their determination over the comms. The Lianthus, a smaller cruiser, positioned itself directly between the transport and the incoming threat. Its turrets fired relentlessly, its shields absorbing blow after blow. "Captain Relis," I said, my voice cracking slightly over the comm. "Fall back, you won't survive this." "We know, Celestarch," Relis replied, his tone calm and resolute, "but they will." The Lianthus was struck by a barrage of quantum lances, its shields collapsing in a burst of light. The ship held for a moment longer, its weapons still firing as it was consumed in a final defiant explosion. But it wasn't enough. The Xalvorth pressed on, their weapons charging for a strike on the Cerelin. My heart thundered as I reached for the command console, my thoughts racing. "Focus everything on those ships. Use the main cannon, now!" The Grace's main cannon fired, its beam slicing through 2 enemy vessels. But as the third unleashed its payload, I could only watch in helpless horror. The strike hit the Cerelin dead center. The Cerelin's shields flared in a desperate final gasp, shimmering with radiant defiance against the inevitable. The cascade of light was almost beautiful, a fragile plea to the void. And then it collapsed. The implosion ripped through its core, an eruption of searing light and jagged debris. Fragments of the ship's hull spun chaotically into the dark, silent witnesses to its annihilation. Secondary explosions rippled along its length, consuming what remained in a merciless, fiery storm. And just like that, 15,000 lives were extinguished, time fractured. The chaos of battle faded to an unbearable stillness. I felt the loss like a physical blow, a wound that tore through the fabric of my very being. It wasn't just grief, it was an obliterating sorrow, a pain so vast it consumed every corner of my mind. I stumbled, my hands catching on the console as my legs buckled. The scream that ripped from my throat was primal, raw, unrelenting. It was the sound of despair that refused to be silenced, an anguish that echoed the collective agony of my people. The Cerelin had carried more than its passengers. It had carried hope, the dreams of families, and the whispers of a future we were desperately trying to rebuild. Tears blurred my vision, hot and unyielding. My chest heaved, my breath catching in jagged gasps as the weight of the moment bore down on me. Images flashed in my mind, children's laughter, elders offering gentle guidance, the fragile beginnings of a new life. All of it was gone. Vaporized in an instant by the cold, unfeeling brutality of the Xalvorth. "No," I whispered, the word shattering as it left my lips. My voice trembled, breaking under the weight of my despair. Around me, the bridge was eerily silent, my crew paralyzed by the enormity of what had just occurred. "Celestarch!" Thalian's voice was barely audible, quivering with grief. "The Cerelin, they're gone." "I know," I choked out, though the words felt hollow. The gaping void left in the Cerelin's absence was undeniable, an abyss that threatened to swallow us all. My hands gripped the console tighter, nails digging into the crystalline surface, as if I could anchor myself to something amidst the storm raging within. But as the grief consumed me, it began to shift. From the ashes of sorrow, something else emerged, a spark of rage. It was not a fleeting anger, but a deep, volcanic fury rising from the depths of my soul. It burned away the despair, leaving behind a singular purpose: vengeance. I straightened slowly, the trembling in my limbs subsiding as the fire within me grew. The Xalvorth had taken so much, but they would take no more, not while I still drew breath. "Thalion," I said, my voice hoarse but resolute. "Bring the fleet together. All remaining ships regroup. We're not done yet." "Yes, Celestarch," he replied, his youthful face pale but determined. He turned to relay the orders, his movements sharp and purposeful, despite the grief that still weighed on him. "Primary weapon systems are ready, Celestarch," an officer reported. "The arc-light cannon is fully charged." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The arc-light cannon was not just a weapon, it was a relic of our darkest days, a device capable of unleashing destruction on an unimaginable scale. But its power came at a cost that I would bear. I turned to the heart of the bridge, where the interface chamber awaited. The machine loomed like a sentinel, its crystalline frame pulsing faintly with psionic energy. This was no mere console, it was a conduit, a mechanism designed to channel the immense psychic power required to operate the arc-light cannon. To wield it was to become one with it, mind and body entwined with the ship's core. Thalion stepped forward, his expression a mix of concern and fear. "Celestarch," he said hesitantly, "if you step into the chamber, the strain—" "I know what it will do," I interrupted, my tone steady. "But I also know what it will do to them." With deliberate steps, I approached the chamber. The crystalline panels parted as I neared, revealing the glowing core within. I stepped into the machine, feeling the faint hum of its energy surround me. The chamber's conduits extended, connecting to the nodes embedded in my armor and skin. A rush of psionic energy surged through me, almost overwhelming in its intensity. My vision blurred, the edges of reality fracturing as my mind merged with the ship's systems. The ship's voice resonated in my mind, calm and clear. Connection established, arc-light cannon, synchronization at 95%. I closed my eyes, focusing on the torrent of energy coursing through me. The grief, the rage, the unyielding love for my people, all of it coalesced, fueling the cannon with a power that transcended the physical. "Clear the area," I commanded, my voice echoing through the bridge. "All vessels, retreat to minimum safe distance." The fleet obeyed, their engines flaring as they moved to safety. The Xalvorth, unaware of what was to come, pressed forward, their ships converging on the Grace like predators sensing blood. "Fire," I said, the word carrying the weight of 1,000 battles, 1,000 losses, and the hope of 1,000 futures. The arc-light cannon unleashed its fury. A beam of pure, incandescent energy erupted from the ship's core, a lance of light so brilliant it seemed to pierce the very fabric of reality. It tore through the Xalvorth fleet, obliterating ships in its path with unrelenting ferocity. The void itself seemed to tremble under its power. But the destruction was only the beginning. As the beam dissipated, an electromagnetic shockwave rippled outward, paralyzing every vessel within its radius. Systems failed, engines sputtered, and weapons fell silent. Even the Xalvorth's biosynthetic forms flickered and dimmed, their resilience no match for the cannon's might. The cost was immediate. My body convulsed, the strain of channeling such immense power threatening to tear me apart. Blood trickled from my nose, my breath coming in shallow gasps as the energy drained from me. My vision swam, the edges of the chamber flickering as my connection to the ship wavered. "Connection unstable," the ship's voice warned, user vitals critical. "Disengage!" I rasped, my voice barely audible. The conduits retracted, releasing me from the chamber's grip. I stumbled forward, catching myself on the edge of the console as the world spun around me. Status report, I demanded, though my voice was weak. Thalion's voice wavered as he replied. The enemy fleet is heavily damaged, Celestarch, but not destroyed. Casualty estimates are immense, tens of thousands. I nodded weakly, my resolve unbroken despite the toll. Prepare for retreat, I said quietly. We cannot sustain this. As the Grace's systems slowly came back online, I turned my gaze to the viewport. The battlefield was a graveyard, littered with the remains of ships and the echoes of lives lost. And beyond it, the Terran fleet began to move. Their massive flagship loomed like a monolith, engines flaring as it approached. Smaller vessels followed in its wake, their movements precise and deliberate. The Terrans had held back, observing, but now they advanced with purpose. Their intentions were unclear, but one thing was certain. The battle was far from over,